Welcome back, folks, to another episode of Roundtable Discussions. We are here with Bob Bowen. Bob is a behavioral consultant, and we're going to talk about what he does today, his work, which is spectacular. It's full of kind-spiritedness and compassion, but also professional work and connections with other people. All of the stuff that he has written and his works will be included in the description of this video. But for now, I'm going to let Bob take it away. Kind of introduce yourself. Tell us either what brought you into the human services field, specifically the work that you do now, and then we'll just kind of go with the flow from there.
All right. Thank you, Casey. When I was going to college in the 1970s, I was going to the University of Northern Iowa. And my major at that point was English. My goal was to get a master's in fine arts, find a university that would employ me, teach poetry, and write poetry, because I really like poetry. So I needed a job, and I worked for a year as a custodian, and that just didn't, I mean, it was a good job, but it didn't do anything for me. And then some friends told us about a group home that was being built near Mary Student Housing. And we thought, what's a group home? And in 1976, nobody knew because the idea of group home was pretty new back then. So I got a haircut because poets have long hair, and bought a tie, and we went down and we applied. And much to our surprise, we were hired. And so for 3 years, we lived in this home with 12 women, all of whom were affected by a dual diagnosis, the combination of a mental health disorder and an intellectual disability. After a year, I thought, oh man, I love this stuff. It's fantastic. So I switched my major from English to social work, which meant an extra 2 years at university. And the rest, as they say, is history. I pretty much stayed in the field. I did go to a seminary for 2 years, a Mennonite seminary in Elkhart, Indiana. And after 2 years, I thought, nah. The idea of being a pastor, it didn't excite me the way that human services excited me. I really have enjoyed the relationships I've had over the years with the people that I've supported, with the people that I work with, and I've stayed in, and I'm still excited about it, and I have no intention of retiring because I still have things to say and things to do, and feel like I've got healing and hope that I can bring to people. So as long as I have that, I'll keep on doing this.
What a lovely response. That was I have goosebumps. I think I got goosebumps the minute you said you cut your hair and you bought a tie. I love that. I'm glad that I think of the world now as luckily no one has to do that anymore. You can get a job at a group home with long hair, but I knew there was some hippie vibes in you. You had that poet hair. When you were in the group home, do you remember what it was that kind of drew you in? Was it the people, or was it what they were dealing with? Was it something you didn't know about yourself? Kind of talk a little bit about that, because going from English to poetry, that's a big difference. So what were you thinking the day you woke up? You're like, oh yeah, this is what I actually want to do.
So I guess there were two things. One is that about 6 months after I was hired, I sat down with my supervisor and I said, Gary, why did you hire us? Because we had no background in human services. We had no technical skills. And what he said was this. He said, Bob, I spend about half an hour with people, talking with them, getting to know them. And then I ask myself, how do I feel? And if the hair on the back of my neck is standing up and I'm asking, how long are these bozos going to be here? I'm not going to hire them. Doesn't matter how qualified they are. Doesn't matter what their skill sets are. If I can't spend half an hour with them, why would I make the people we support spend 8 or 10 or 12 hours with them? And he said he could teach me the technical parts of the work that we do, but he couldn't teach me the relational parts. And it was the relational parts of the work that I do that just really drew me in. Primarily the relationships that I've had with the people that I've been able to support, and the ways in which they have taught me what it means to be human, what it means to interact with people, what it means to be wounded, and what it means to be healed. And it's just been awesome. The second thing that happened was right about that same time. I was working with a psychiatrist named Coleman Burns, who's passed away since. Coleman was fantastic, and he would come every week, and he'd sit with me, and then would talk, and then he would meet with the individuals. And he came in, and I said, "Hi, Dr. Burns," and he said, "Call me Coleman." And second week he came in, and I said, "Hi, Dr. Burns," and he said, "Call me Coleman." The third week he said, call me Coleman," and I just couldn't. So the next week he came a little early, and he sat down, and he said, "Bob, I need to explain something to you. I'm a psychiatrist and you're not. And that's all right. You are someone who spends time with people that I just don't have. And you are just as much a professional as I am. And the fact that I'm a psychiatrist is just my role. And your role is that of a group home house parent. And I rely on you to give me the information I need to make good decisions, because I've only got 5 or 10 minutes to spend with people." So I started calling him Coleman, and Coleman taught me just so much, about psychiatry, and just the whole field of health and wellness before those terms even came into vogue. And he was a marvelous man, a great human being. And for years, I thought all psychiatrists were just like him. Yeah, I since found out that they're not. I was an adjunct assistant professor of psychiatry for 8 years at the University of Rochester. Even though I'm not a psychiatrist, I met someone else like Coleman, a guy named Mike Privatera, and Mike had the same spirit about him. And he's a brilliant psychiatrist. And then after he heard me speak in Amsterdam, he asked me to join the faculty there and participate with them in doing research and writing on how to prevent workplace violence, which is the violence that takes place primarily between employees. And the Yeah, there's that whole field of improving the quality of work life is a big part of the work that I do, and I really value my time when I was there.
Workplace violence. He would have never, that's not something even in my time with all these new terms and types of studies that you hear often. Can you speak on that just a little bit more? Like what exactly, who came along and said, "Hey, I think we might need people to help deal with the violence between our employees"? Like what is
Um, I can't answer the question of who came along and answer that question. What I can tell you is that a guy named Frederick Hertzberg did a study back in the 1950s looking at what motivates employees, what keeps people at work. And the usual answer that you get is money. And it turns out that money isn't the thing that brings people to work. And he came up with a list of what he called motivators, things that really motivate people, and things that he called hygiene factors, things that kept you there. There's a website called businessballs.com. So the idea is you have all kinds of balls you have to juggle in the air. So businessballs.com. And they have a presentation of his theory using a platform and a rocket ship. And the rocket ship has the real motivators, which are things like the work itself, things like a sense of achievement, the ability to really see success in the work that you do, opportunities for advancement. Those are the things that motivate people. The hygiene factors are things that provide stability. And It turns out that the number one destabilizing factor at work is poor relationship with peers. And the number two destabilizing factor is poor relationships with supervisors. The reason many people leave a job isn't because of pay, it's because of toxicity, the toxic nature of the relationships that are present, either between employees or sometimes between employees and supervisors. There's a bunch of research that's done using data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that analyzes workplace violence. And my friend Mike Privatera is one of the leading researchers in this area. And after I met him, he asked me to write a chapter for a book on preventing workplace violence in general and mental health hospital settings. And so Mike's one of the leaders in that area, but I can't tell you who first came up with that.
That's a-okay. It's just not something that, at least in my experience, I've heard of often, but I love the insight that you've given. And it kind of touches on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So I know that you have a lot of interest in just the matrix of needs, kind of like the building blocks of the individual, right? And so lots of us watching have already learned at least the basics of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Can you expand on what your work includes with the hierarchy of needs and specifically why it's important to you? Because you write about it a lot in your blog, and I love the breakdown you have on it. Before I get into my own little rant, tell me more about your interest in the hierarchy of needs.
Okay, so I should have a little history, I guess. I worked in human services directly for about 25 years, and most of my work was in the field of intellectual disabilities and dual diagnosis. I did spend some time working in juvenile detention and mental health settings, but primarily my area of expertise was in intellectual disabilities. And in that area, Maslow's hierarchy of needs helped to identify the things that got in the way of the ability of people to develop to their full potential. And so Maslow's idea was that the first thing people needed to have was basic human needs: food, water, shelter, and sleep. And then the second thing was safety, not just physical safety, but also psychological safety, emotional safety, sexual safety. There's all kinds of forms of safety fall into that category. The next area was what he called love and belongingness, and being in relationships that we're whole, that we're healthy, that we're healing, and then self-esteem needs came next, and then the top of the pyramid was self-actualization. And as I taught Maslow to employees, and as I thought about it, it just really made a lot of sense. But it also had some areas that just didn't quite connect with me. And so about maybe 2.5 years ago, I began to rework Maslow's approach, and basically took his original article written in 1943, in which he said that this article, he said, will stand or fall based on what he calls research is yet to be done. And his idea was that it would be an expanding, developing concept, not a static concept. Interestingly enough, Maslow didn't develop the hierarchy. A guy named Charles McDermott did in 1960. In 1943, he developed an approach to understanding human needs, but he didn't organize it in a hierarchy. He talked about the interdependency of the needs and the ways in which they related to each other. And it was McDermott and then others after him who built a structure. And what's happened then is that people have looked at that structure and said, oh, first you have to have this, and then this, and then this. And the answer is no, you need all of them all the time. And so I just started reworking things, and came up with the idea of the matrix term in conversations with my son, Elliot, who at the time was a biology major, and so I was just talking with him, and he explained about what's called the intracellular matrix or extracellular matrix. It turns out that each cell in every organism on our planet has a physical structure called extracellular matrix, or I'll just say matrix. And the purpose of that matrix is to bring, for lack of a better term, organization to the cell. So when you look at a leaf, for instance, and you see all the veins in the leaf and those little lines, what you're looking at is actually the matrix, and it has cell signaling capacities. So there can be intracellular, so communication within one cell, and then intercellular communication between the cells, and the matrix does that. Yeah, and it organizes the functions of life so that the organism, whether it's a leaf or a person, um, is able to perform the function. So you have this idea of form and function, and so the matrix provides the form, and then supports the function of an organism. And when I think about that with people, safety isn't a separate need. Safety is an all-encompassing need. We need safety all the time, everywhere. You know, safety, in a sense, is the glue that holds us together. And if we don't feel safe, one of the phrases we use is that we're falling apart. And it's a literal falling apart psychologically, because safety is the psychological frame, the psychological matrix that keeps our psychological functioning healthy and whole. Yeah. So the other thing that a matrix is used for is as a mathematical model that you can look at and see relationships between different parts of a whole. Yeah, so I'm by no means a math major or math whiz. I flunked statistics the first time I took it in college. I had to take it a second time because it's just, yeah, it's not natural for me. But matrix is a visual model that lets you look at the whole and see the disparate parts, the interrelated parts as well. And so I started playing around with that, and then through the work I do as a behavioral consultant, I'm aware of the neurobiological impact of childhood trauma and the way in which trauma disrupts neurological development, and maybe a better term is neurosensory development. So not just our neurology, but our neurosensory systems. Yeah, and safety is the most important thing that we have to have. If we don't have safety, then the ways in which our neurological systems develop are going to be altered by that lack of safety. Yeah. So when I teach, I have just a blue pyramid with lines in it, and I say this is the matrix, and this lies behind everything we're going to talk about. You always have to have safety. The first thing I introduce is the idea of subsistence: food, water, shelter, sleep, and also illumination. If you can't go to the bathroom, you're going to have some difficulties, and there are side effects of a number of the psychiatric medications people take that are actually constipating. And so then you have to take other medication to follow that along. And if an organism can't eliminate its waste, it's going to die. And so we have to be able to eliminate. So all of that is subsistence. If you are able to get your subsistence needs met, if you can eat and have water, um, but it's in a setting that isn't safe. It may be neglectful. It may be physically harmful. Then there's a good chance that you're going to develop some food-related disorders as you continue to develop. Because then your need for food was met in an unsafe setting. The next, what I call core need, is attaching relationships. What people usually call attachment. And if you have an attaching figure, usually a parent, often a mother, father. If you have an attaching relationship with someone who is not healthy themselves and is abusive in their relationship, then you may develop attachment related disorders. The third core need is communication. And again, if you are not safe in your relationships, you may develop communication disorders. Yeah, you've got to have safety in order to fully develop subsistence needs, attachment needs, and communication needs.
That is lovely. My brain absorbed that so well. I think you've developed something, from my perspective at least, not having heard of this before, is beautiful and makes so much sense. I'm really glad that Maslow himself said that this isn't static. This kind of stuff isn't. It's got to be built upon, and you took the advantage of saying, okay, well, let's build upon this and kind of rearrange these ideas of trauma. So you talk about safety, and I don't think there's anybody who can argue that safety isn't one of those crucial needs. But then I think, like, I don't know if there's a single person in this entire world who's ever experienced like wholesome safety, right? Because food being one of them, you could have the most loving and well, loving and nurturing family, but you have a parent or a spouse who doesn't appreciate themselves. Then you're kind of in a weird paradigm that most people might not think about, but has consequences to it. And I can speak from personal experience on that one. It's just as having a family member who doesn't appreciate themselves as loving, as nurturing as they were towards me. It definitely affects some parts of your own development, right? And I think that's fascinating. And it something that Maslow's hierarchy of needs doesn't touch on is that interconnectedness, that intra matrixness that you have now highlighted. It all plays a part at the same time, not one prior to the other or one after. So, man, my brain is just so happy right now because it makes so much sense. And I feel like you've included more about the living condition. Not only that helps the person understand themselves, but like as service providers helps us understand, okay, it's not just this need that's missing and therefore these are their problems. This need might be present, but you know, problem might be sourced or consistent from a different area of this matrix. And I think that's wonderful. It makes it a little bit more complicated, but no one said that we were easy, trying to piece ourselves out, right? So how have you taken what you've developed, especially in the three needs, right, and explain this to other people in either their work, their employment, or their own personal lives? How does this play out for those that you've helped?
So, if you look at the model, you have core needs. So those would be subsistence, attaching relationships, and communication. The next two would be growth needs, which should be achievement and social relationships. Social relationships are different from attaching relationships. So when a child is born, the child is going to attach to a significant caregiver, often mother first, and then father perhaps, or other adults, perhaps older sibling. But there's going to be attaching relationships that are there. Social relationships are developed outside of that intimate, what's sometimes called the nuclear family. So when a parent takes their child out into the community, to a play group or to a playground, there are other kids that are there, and that child is going to gravitate towards them. And there's a need that children have to relate to other people, to socialize, uh, and uh, and so as a kid, you start to relate to people in settings that you don't have any control over. You didn't choose to go to the playground, your parents took you there. You didn't choose to go to the mall, your parents took you there. Yeah, but they're still important. And it's how we learn to relate to people that are not me. Yeah, so some theorists talk about children first starting with me, not me, as a way of identifying the world, and then going into me, you, and then identifying that there are other people out there who are people, and so you develop these relationships. And the reason I bring that up is that if you are in a setting where you didn't have healthy attaching relationships, then you may use social relationships as a way to try and meet that need. Yeah, and you may instead of interacting with people, use them and use them to meet your own needs. You may try to have as many relationships as you can, and that can persist on into adulthood with people who talk about the hundreds and thousands of followers they have. Um, but it could be that there's a lack of intimacy, a lack of central core attachment that may be there. Likewise, achievement is something that kids need to do. About 2 years of age is when kids will start saying, "I do it," and they'll push they'll push the adult away.
Yes.
I do it,
I do it. I do it.
and there's a need to do that. For people who lacked healthy attaching relationships, achievement may become a way of meeting that need. So now you say, "Look at this! I'm so good at this," and then later on in life, achievement morphs into autonomy. I am autonomous. I'm responsible for myself, and it takes that idea of achievement and steps it up a notch. Yeah, and you make your own decisions. You're responsible for yourself, but at the same time, you also have a need to now enter into what I call affiliative relationships. So now you choose the relationships you're going to have. You choose the groups you're going to be with. And so you move from being in social relationships to being in affiliative relationships, where you say, "I'm going to affiliate with," and you start selecting groups to be with. And kids start doing this usually, somewhere around, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then absolutely up into the teen years, where you really strongly identify with several groups, and now you become your own person, and so you have that sense of autonomy, being your own self, along with affiliation, and being with a group of people. And between autonomy and affiliation, you have intimacy. And intimacy, one of the first things people think about is sexual intimacy. It doesn't have to be that. Intimacy is the ability to be in a relationship and be honest with no fear of rejection, to be able to be completely yourself and know without a shadow of a doubt that this relationship will continue. Um, we don't get much of that, and that's just a need that people have. And it's a need that crosses cultures. I've worked in different cultures around the world, and this is one of the things I've looked at is that need to be in a relationship where you can be honest without fear of rejection. Yeah. The top of the matrix of needs isn't self-actualization; it's interdependent actualization. It's being in relationships with other people and valuing them as much as you value yourself. Yeah. Indigenous communities are my model for what this looks like. There's so many great models out there. The Maori community in New Zealand is one that I've studied, and their sense of interdependency is just marvelous. Native American communities also have that, and in fact, the idea in Native American communities is that uh, the purpose of actualization isn't for me, it's for us. And it's not just for us while I'm alive, it's for us into the future and into the past. And, uh, and that idea of interdependency is just really, really, really central. Interdependency is also a part of life. And again, my son has taught me so much about biology, and there's something called quorum sensing, where single cell bacteria will they form a colony, and then they will send out scouts to see what the impact of the colony is on the environment, and if there are too many of us then they actually slow down the rate of reproduction because they don't want to overwhelm the environment, because if they do, they'll die. And there's that sense of interdependence that's present at a cellular level that is part of who we are as life forms on this planet.
I'm like glowing from the inside out because of all of the things you you just shared. It's absolutely true. Let me gather my thoughts for a second. Yes, the interdependency, the relationships between each other, and just that specific notion that one cannot exist without the other, but both must exist at the same time or not at all. Like it applies on a cellular level, which by the way, I was thinking we should have your son on for a different, we should do an interview with you and your son so we can see it on the a micro and macro level. But yeah, it's incredible. And that is a repetitive theme in a lot of the conversations that I've already had with people. And then just the work that I'm interested in is that interpersonal and intrapersonal interactions between our own well-being, our own safety, and then how as human service providers, we come to understand how that functions within us and then how that functions within others and how that relates, right? Because if I know my own safety and I'm confident in that I have it and that I'm surrounded by it to whatever degree I need it to be and to serve you better, then I'm going to do that. Then I'm going to serve you better. And I thank goodness that we have not yet become a very clinical, you know, idea segregated kind of, I don't know, discipline or industry, right? But a lot of parts have, psychiatry and mental health can be very segmented and broken apart, and the medical field and all this sorts of stuff that doesn't include the idea that there's this intersection amongst our needs, our connections, our relationships, and that is vital to making ourselves either free, either united, either healthier, whatever it might be. And I think your matrix of needs, it's like the 3.0. We skipped 2.0 and went straight to 3.0 as far as what we need to focus on is vital in these in the work that we do in understanding ourselves as well as providers. I love it. Oh my gosh, I want, so if you could write me an entire book and then mail it to me and then I could read it and study, because this is one of those, I have that feeling I used to get in class when I was hearing something and it would be like, this makes sense. My inner head voice would be like, this makes sense. No, this makes a lot of sense. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Like no one's talking about this. This is amazing. So one more question for you. So I just ranted on why I think it's important that we talk about these different types of intersection of needs. But for everyone watching, why do you think it's important that we focus on this intersectionality of the things that we need and the experiences that we have? Who cares? Why is it important?
Do you know the name Leo Buscaglia? Leo Buscaglia was a writer, a thinker, and he has all kinds of motivational things that are on the web. One of the things that he said is that you can only give to others what you have yourself. If I want to give, and I use the term healing and hope to the people I support through my work, I have to have healing and hope to do that. If I don't have something inside of me, I can't give it to you. It's that simple. And so for us to, as human service organizations, to bring healing and hope to the people who we support, we have to first give it to our employees. We have to make sure they have it. You can only give to others what you have yourself. If you haven't got it, you can't give it. If you try, you'll end up providing services instead of providing supports. You have to talk about it. You have to actually live it in order to give it. Because the only way in which we can bring healing and hope to the people that we support is through relationship. Relationship is the medium for all of our work. If we didn't have relationships, we couldn't do our work.
Got me teary-eyed over here, giggling and nodding my head in agreement all at the same time. So I'm excited to keep this conversation going. So if you would please extend the invitation to your son about coming on and having another conversation, that would be awesome.
Okay.
All right, folks. Thank you, Bob, so much for having this conversation with me today and sharing with the people that have watched. And we will be back in time for another episode. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.
The Matrix of Needs, y'all. It's the next big thing. We are grateful for you tuning in to this episode of Roundtable Discussions podcast. You can find previous talks on our YouTube page. Just search NOHS Organization and click subscribe. Remember, these conversations include you too, so leave comments below or you can shoot me an email directly. All of our social media handles can be found in the description box below. And of course, there is a ton more to learn and do on our website, nationalhumanservices.org. While you're there, register for the NOHS virtual conference this October and find more information on what you can look forward to. Many thanks to our special guest today, Bob Bowen. Some of his work and links to his website can be found below, and we will talk to you soon.